Welcome back to Producer's Toolbox. I'm your host, Carole Adrienne, and today we are going to talk about something of interest to lots of people, which is making low-budget films. And we are really lucky today. In Philadelphia, we have we make this show from MLTV Mainline Network in Wayne, PA, but inside the city of Philadelphia, we have a large public access cable station called PhillyCAM. And today we have Roland Boyden, who is the technical wizard of PhillyCAM, and they're a sizable station which produces quite a lot of content. So we are calling all content creators, or if you want to be a content creator, whether you're thinking low budget movie, YouTube show, TV show, it's how to do it on a very little or non-existent budget. So, Roland, thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a long time.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So you are the access coordinator for PhillyCAM. So Roland deals with all those content creators to guide them through the technical process of making the dozens of shows that air on PhillyCAM. So he's got quite a lot of experience. And we are going to ask him about what goes into making a low budget film. I just want to be clear. Under the low budget category, there's really low budget and no budget. So if you are working with your lunch money or your weekly allowance, you can still be a filmmaker. So low budget usually covers productions costing from $100,000 to $1 million. I know that doesn't sound low, but in the world of $200 and $300 million movies, it is. And no budget means you work with whatever you have. So, Roland, would you tell us a little about how you got into TV production, please?
Yeah, sure. Actually, just right on cue, got my little furry friend here. I'm going to hope he doesn't tip over all my equipment and stuff if I jettison him out of here. But yeah, so...
You don't have to have a cat, though, right, to make a film?
It helps. I've tried to... They're not the most cooperative actors, though. I've tried to make a few short films centered around my little guy, Moscow, here, and he'll be doing the cutest thing in the world right up until the moment you hit record on the camera, and then it, vanishes. So they're not so well behaved in that regard. But, so let's see. I started making films when I was basically just a kid. When I was 10 or 11, I think, I had a friend who got a camcorder. And then when I was in high school, there was a sort of pilot program they were kicking off where you could get a grant to make a feature-length film. And so I applied to be in that program, and I submitted my screenplay along with a bunch of other students, and they picked my screenplay to make. So we got some funding, and I got to basically leave school for a whole semester. And I got to use it as science credits or art credits, but I wasn't really a science kid. So I got to put all these credits I got into science. So I made it through high school without ever taking chemistry or biology or anything like that, because I was just making a movie the whole time. But that really got me hooked on making movies. And I got a job with a local filmmaker doing editing for him out of that. And he was on the board of a local PEG station in the town I grew up in Brattleboro, Vermont. So he recommended me to the TV station, and they hired me. Originally, it was really going to just be as somebody to kind of keep the equipment in shape and inventory it and things like that. But shortly after I started there, the executive director had a falling out with the board and quit kind of halfway through my training and left the station without a tech person. And I was like a 16-year-old with half my training done. And so I just really got thrown in on my feet and had to try to learn and figure out how to keep things running and help people and teach people. So it was definitely trial by fire, but made me really love public access and PEG and community media. When I say PEG, it's public education and government is like the shorthand for these community media stations that are all across the country. And there's a really cool network of them. So I did that actually for 12 years. And then when my partner decided to come to Penn to go to nursing school, I had about a year's notice that we were going to do that. And I basically bookmarked the PhillyCAM hire us page and was clicking refresh on it like every week to see if they had any openings. Cause I knew I wanted to stay working in community media, and PhillyCAM was kind of like the one in Philly. And didn't see anything. And then after about a month after we moved, I clicked refresh, and suddenly there was this access facilitator position, which on paper looked exactly the same as what I'd been doing in Vermont, opened up. And so it was kind of a little miracle for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I always
so that
think
was
the PEG stations really are the perfect intersection of art, education, and technology. And it sounds like really that's where you were coming from. But it also it taught you how to work with bare bones budgets and equipment. I wanted to ask you, because lots of people, there's and I don't want to say it's an urban myth, but lots of people talk about shooting a movie on their cell phones. Is that a thing?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. It's especially been a thing, I think, since 2015 was when Tangerine was made, which is now a very famous indie film that won a ton of awards and was all shot on iPhones. And now, iPhones from 2015, iPhones have come a long way since 2015. But they kind of really proved that if you have a good story, good actors, in their case, they had really good sound as well. We can talk more about that today. They put a lot of their budget toward having a real sound person there, but they, basically just had iPhones that they shot the whole movie with, and it looked great and was not immersion breaking in any way. And if anything, it kind of helped draw you into the film. And I think that really sort of set the stage for at least people in that sort of world to take it seriously. I know from my perspective, working at a community media center, it's been on my radar for a long time, ever since, I don't know, maybe the iPhone 4 or something like that, just because it's that idea of accessibility that that's the tool that people have, access to the most easily. And so this idea that if you could make it work, if you can make it do what you need it to do, that's going to be better than, we obviously in places like PhillyCAM, we have cameras, you can take the training, you can take those out. And that's a great option because that's also ends up being very cost effective. But if you don't have that camera with you, that's kind of the main difference. Whereas a cell phone, if you have it on you, and it's also, something that you are going to be able to familiarize yourself with. And everybody's had the experience of pulling their phone out and shooting a little video. And so I think it makes that jump to trying to be more careful in your craft easier in some ways. Cameras are notorious for having outdated menu options, interfaces. I know a lot of creators who've been begging camera companies to kind of modernize how they do menus, how they use touch screens, how they do things like that. And they really haven't. And so smartphones in some ways have some of the most kind of advanced just in terms of the interface that you can use, because they're constantly updating and iterating every year. And companies like Apple and Samsung are competing rapidly. And so they are in some ways generating technology that's eventually we'll see in the camera space, but is years behind. And so there's a lot of ways you can put it to use for sure.
Wow. Well, a few years ago, we had a young lady we're still in touch with, Anjali Bose, who's attending film school in California now. She's, I think, going into junior year. But she was a junior in high school, and she shot a short film on her smartphone. She downloaded iMovie, which was free editing software from online, and edited with that. And I was impressed with the film itself. And I thought, wow, you really can, as long as you've got a smartphone and access to a computer, hopefully both, you can really have tremendous range of it's your imagination and your technical ability to some extent that are really going to propel you forward. Now, if you're working with just those, I mean, is there anything, what are the bare bones requirements that you think that we need? If we're just if you're just working with your allowance, what can you do to make your film?
Yeah, great question. So I think having the phone, in some cases, I think we'll get to this later too, but having more than one phone. So if you're shooting it with a friend and you have similar phones or similar spec phones, so that you're not completely reliant on a single phone. I know, for instance, that film I was talking about, Tangerine, I think they had 3 phones at all times, not necessarily to record simultaneously, but because one might fill up and you can't just pull an SD card out. You have to download the footage, or the battery might die. Or so in some ways, it's more like pedantic than that some of the key limitations of the phone comes down to like keeping it charged, keeping enough space free on it to actually be able to record these long takes of high quality video. Then you have to plug your lightning cable in to get it off your iPhone. And, there's sort of things like that. But yeah, I think so. Having the phone, you can shoot with the default phone app. A few years ago, this company, Filmic Pro, came out with a really great app. It is a paid app, and it's kind of a bummer. They've switched to a subscription model, which I really hate, because then you're kind of constantly paying them a little bit of money. I think it's only $1 or $2 a month, but you used to just be able to pay them $10 or 20, and then it was $20 and be good. Now they want to kind of keep nickel and diming you, but they're really kind of the top of the pack in my mind in terms of giving you a little more control with your phone app. You get more control over the quality of the files that you make. You can set things like the exposure and things like that, so it's not fluctuating around on you if things change brightness wise. Set focus, things like that. And you can see like your audio meters on the screen, which is super useful. So having an app like that, I think, is really useful. And then to me, the first sort of next thing to think about from a tech perspective, because I mean, really the simplest answer is you need an idea and somebody to, go make that idea with you. Like if you have a good idea, everything else is really secondary to that. And I guess the commitment to actually follow through on that idea. But I think in terms of the technical thing, what we see with cell phones a lot is audio becomes the biggest challenge.
I was going to ask about the audio. Can you handle that with I hadn't thought about using multiple phones. That's like having a multi-camera shoot, right? But
you could absolutely. Yeah, so you could absolutely do that. One additional way we've done it is to use the second phone basically as an audio recorder, or if your talent are coming with their phones, one of kind of the most basic rules of audio is, in general, proximity. The closer you can get the microphone to the subject, the better it'll sound. So even like $1,000 microphone that's pretty far away from your subject is going to sound worse than a $30 microphone that's properly positioned and placed near to the subject. So one way we've gotten around that, and again, it depends on how you're going to edit later, but is to use your secondary phones as audio recorders. So you're basically recording to one phone for your video, and then you have basically you're kind of using the other phones as like personal recorders. So and you can buy cheap lavalier microphones that plug right into the phone. These days, all phones need a little dongle because they don't have headphone jacks anymore, which is kind of annoying. But if you haven't lost your little dongle that came with your phone yet, you can plug in one of these lav mics, or you can buy a lav mic that connects directly with either USB-C or Lightning if you have an Android or iPhone. So you can get a little mic that just goes right into the phone. But the actual microphones on the phones have gotten better and better as well. And so we've done tricks where, you put a phone in a shirt pocket or something like that, so it's really close. Or we even just did a collaborative film challenge at PhillyCAM that was, again, trying to just use the tools we had. And we were like gaff taping a phone to a broom pole and holding it over. So, if that phone is just out of frame, and it's kind of amazing how good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of amazing how good the sound quality on phones have gotten, to the point where I've done a few films recently where we've had to do some pickup lines of dialogue. And so I've told people, just record that with the mic on your phone. They record it and they send it to me, and I go to put it in the edit, and I'm like, oh, this sounds too good. It doesn't sound realistic. Like, because what we filmed on set had a big boom pole that was, probably 5 or 6 feet away. And if they hold up their cell phone, right to their mouth, it's like, it sounds too crystal clear. So then I have to, email back and be like, hey, can you do that take again, but put your phone like 1.5 feet away from you, or maybe even 3 feet away from you. Cause we actually need it to not quite sound that good. So that's a way to, I think, to use phones to get audio. And then the other thing that's happened is there's been a real kind of explosion recently of cheaper wireless mic solutions. Rode has made a really cool one. I meant to borrow one from PhillyCAM so I could hold it up, and I totally forgot. But for anybody out there, if they look up, they're called the Rode Wireless Go Minis, I think. And they're these little matchbox-sized wireless mics. They're super cool. And they have the mic built right into this little matchbox-sized transmitter. And that you can get up to 2 transmitters that go back to a single receiver, and that single receiver can plug right into your phone with a USB-C cable or USB-C to Lightning if you have an iPhone. And they also record onto the little transmitter itself. So you have a backup recording right there in case there was a signal dropout or something. And they're maybe not no budget. I think it's like $200 for the one that has 2 mics. But compared to what wireless mics used to cost, where if you wanted a recorder and wireless mic and you wanted one for each of your people, it would be like crazy expensive. It's definitely brought the cost down. And one thing I've recommended a lot to people.
That was it was $25. I've been using it for the last.
I mean, those are phenomenal. Yeah, and actually, we have at PhillyCAM too. Yeah, we have some $25 ones they're not wireless, so it really depends on what you're doing. But again, if you're going to run it to your phone and stash your phone in your pocket, then the fact that it just goes right into the phone with a wire is fine. Yeah. And the other great thing about some of this cheaper gear is even if you don't have the budget to buy a $220 mic or something, there are plenty of places you can rent it, and you can basically, rent it for $10 or something like that a day, or even less than that. If you rent for a week, I think those roads are $15 or something like that. So that cost coming down is not only great if you were able to put a few pennies together and buy it yourself, but it's also meant that renting it is way cheaper. Because it used to be if you were going to rent a $600 microphone, it would be, I don't know, $80 a day or something, or $60 a day.
Well, actually, and
so now it's just
at a station like PhillyCAM, which is a sizable public access station. If you're a member of one of those PEG stations, now PhillyCAM does allow you to borrow equipment for free, which is pretty amazing. Cameras, sound equipment. Roland, you had said 4 things that were really, I thought, profound pieces of advice. Can I ask you to talk us through those? Because
sure,
I think they were of tremendous value. You talked about preparing. You said to check out all the locations ahead of time, best runs, visualize. Can you talk a little bit about the prep? And then I have 3 more to hit you with.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Yeah, there's I think the industry term is pre-visualization, and they shorten it to previs. So if you ever hear people talking about previs or we need a previs, that's what they're talking about. But on the no budget side, because you don't maybe have a whole art department and art team and access to big sets and all those things, you really have to make do with what you've got. And one thing I feel like I've learned over the years with film is, the camera, whatever camera you're using, your phone, lenses, all that stuff, it's such a specific window of space. It's really different to what your eye sees. So you can walk into a room and it looks beautiful and amazing, and then you pull out the camera and you look through the lens and you're kind of missing some of the stuff and it looks flat. Or you can walk into a room and be like, oh my God, how are we going to make this look good? This looks so ugly. And then you kind of crop to a specific area and you're like, oh my gosh, it actually looks really good. So there's a lot of tools where you can try to guess what something's going to look like before you get to a space. And obviously, like, there'll be plenty of situations making a no budget film where you just can't go to a place ahead of time or something like that. And there's ways you can kind of, look up Street View photos or Google Photos and things like that. Or, there's apps that mimic different camera focal lengths so that you can kind of look at what your camera is likely to see. But I think there's really no substitute for having some time in a space. And so for the films that I've had, maybe like the best experience with or the best luck with, I've had time to go to locations ahead of time, take at least some approximation of the equipment I'm going to use for the film, and turn that camera on and put that lens on and really look through that viewpoint and see it ahead of time. Listen to some audio. One thing I always tell people too,
right?
Yeah. One thing with audio I always tell people is our brains are kind of amazing at filtering out audio. If you're on a busy city street, after 30 seconds or so, all that noise kind of completely gets removed. If you're in an echoey, cavernous room, our brains really do adjust to that. But the audio recording isn't going to adjust to that. It's going to be picking up all those little noises throughout. So any extra prep you can do to get into a space ahead of time same goes with working with actors, get everybody together and comfortable ahead of time and go through. And there's just so many little things that I think no matter how many years of experience I get under my belt, just that kind of guess and check of trying to look at something and be like, I'm not sure if I like that. Let's try something else. Oh, that's great right there. There's really no substitute for that. So, yeah.
Well, there's another thing that you brought up lately here, and I think it's really important, and I wasn't thinking about it. You said Be redundant. Have two of everything if you possibly can. So yeah, you want, if you can possibly have two, if you're shooting on a cell phone, you want at least two of them on site, or two microphones, because stuff goes wrong and you need a backup. Can you just give us a drive through of the redundancy, please?
Yeah, it really extends to everything. And obviously it's a luxury too. You're not going to be able to have two of your fanciest camera you've saved up for lenses, or, there's things where you just can't do that. But yeah, there's any opportunity you get to add that redundancy. So audio is one where we try to, if we can have, like when we're helping people set up interviews and things like that at PhillyCAM, have a boom mic overhead and a clip-on lavalier mic. Or if you're going to be recording doing the cell phone in the pocket trick, also try to have some kind of on camera mic that's in pretty close proximity. So if something happens with one mic, you still have the other. I'm a huge fan of cameras that record to two SD cards at the same time. Not all cameras are going to do that. But that can be really great, because if an SD card fails, which does happen, or when we do these big shoots at PhillyCAM, we always try to have the member bring their own SD card, and we have a whole second deck recording to kind of just a spare PhillyCAM SD card. And that way, if you hop back on the bus and that SD card with this amazing shoot with this one of a kind, guest that you just did disappears forever somewhere, we have this backup copy. When we copy the files somewhere, before I ever format or erase an SD card, I try to make sure it's in two places. So it kind of extends to all those things. And it can even go so far as, one thing that happens a lot in the no budget film space is you're kind of leaning on everybody to help out, friends who are actors and somebody who's got a space that you can use. And those things do often fall through. And so trying to just go into a plan, going into a situation with a backup plan, is there somebody else who can step in performance wise? If this space doesn't work, is there another space? If you don't have enough time, can you craft this story so that the shorter amount of time makes sense? Like, there's kind of necessitates it just because of the lack of resources, but in some ways it can also lead to new discoveries too.
Well, another thing that you said that I thought was pretty profound and very true, you said time is your most valuable thing when you are shooting. Can you elaborate on that just a little?
Yeah, sure. This is kind of one thing I've learned. Yeah. Yes. I guess I should say I've been pretty obsessed with what really is not even low budget, but as you're saying, no budget filmmaking for years now. I just love the idea of trying to see like how close can you get? And it depends on a lot of factors and things like that. But obviously you're not competing with a Marvel movie or anything like that if you have $0. But compared to some of those $100,000, $200,000 indie films, like what percentage of the way can you kind of get there if you really just put all that sort of blood, sweat, and tears of your own in and things like that? And what I've learned is really, time is maybe the biggest asset that you can gain back, because I assumed for a long time that if I ever got a big budget, that's what it would buy me. It would buy me more time with the actors. I could get these spaces for longer. But the reality is, once you have a crew, everything just scales up astronomically, because all of a sudden you have 8, 10, 15, 18 people on set. They're all getting paid usually by the hour. And you're in spaces that you're renting that are expensive and, also pay for by the hour. And so you actually kind of lose time. And I think until you get to like Martin Scorsese level, where you can just take as much time as you want with your actors because you're allowed to burn studio money, everybody in between from that $100,000 level up to maybe a handful of directors who are allowed to just take as much money, the James Camerons and Martin Scorseses of the world, everybody else in between is really crunched for time. So if you're doing a real passion project, if you can, like we just talk about at PhillyCAM doing resource writing, which is sort of like write a script for people you already know, actors you already know, that plays to their strengths, or locations that you already have access to. But if you can do that kind of thing where you can give yourself extra time, so extra time to work with the actors, time to really, again, I was sort of talking about that guess and check of like, turn the camera on, try something, see if you like it, move it a little if you don't like it. Those things all take time, but the more you can do that, the more you can kind of claw back some of that production value that's being lost to the fact that you don't have a budget. And sometimes, yeah.
We're going to put Roland's recommendations up on a slide at the end of the show, but you have one more that to me is one of the most important things. You said be willing to collaborate. So we just have a few minutes left. Can you just address collaborating? Because to me, that turned out to be one of the best possible parts of filmmaking that I hadn't anticipated. But tell us, give us a minute or so on your advice about collaborating, please.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the same way that having some of that extra time can be your kind of secret weapon to try to, again, sort of reach some of the heights that you would be able to do if you had a budget. A film traditionally is very siloed, and there's some reasons for that, but it's, there's an audio person or many audio people, and they only do that. There's production people, and then in theory, there's this director with the overall vision who kind of pieces those things together. But when you're doing the no budget way, you're really kind of wearing a lot of hats. And the good part of that is you can kind of also bring everybody else on set into that fold with you. So whenever I start a project, especially if I'm working with people who've come from like the industry, because that siloing can be so ingrained, I try to really, on a traditional film set, you would never go to the director if you were a camera assistant or something and say, hey, what if we try this? You just aren't allowed to do that. And so I try to make it clear, like on this set, you can do that and you should do that. And, I won't always agree. But sometimes the dialogue that comes out of that disagreement can lead to something new, or it's not even a disagreement, but looking at what our options are. So with everything, the performance, the lighting, even just what if we move the camera a little bit this way, then we would see this behind us and it would look really cool. Or do you realize there's something, sticking out of the back of her head in the background? Like maybe we want to move a little because that looks weird, or all that stuff. I just think the more you can bring other people in, and honestly, it's the most fun part too. So when you're thinking about what you want to get out of a experience like this, doing all that collaboration can really just be so rewarding because, and then everybody's invested in it and everybody feels like they're a part of the process.
I find it really expands creativity. You throw an idea out there and somebody else you're working with says, okay, what if we do this? And it just enlarges the whole scope of the project. So it's one of the things that I hadn't expected to find as part of filmmaking. And it's totally one of my favorite parts. If you say to someone, hey, can you put gunfire under that shot? And then they not only put gunfire, they put rain or horses or something else that just really make the production that multi-layer it and make it more dimensional. So
I think too, it does take a little work because it's the arts don't have to be, but often can be so ego driven. I think people get very used to trying to fight to defend their vision, but that can kind of blur into to missing really great ideas and other things. And so, I think I always try to tell everybody I'm working with, like the more we can just throw everything out there and we'll try to, make something together, because some of the best stuff is going to come out of that, and it's going to come out of it in the moment. And like you said, that's such a rewarding experience. Those are, for me, always the best days on set, where something's working okay, maybe, and we're going along, and then somebody has some idea and you have an idea that builds off it, and all of a sudden you're making something that's 10 times better than what you even expected.
You really do. Well, fortunately, we've asked Roland to come back because you have so much information. And so we're going to put your recommendations up, and then hopefully you'll join us next time when we bring him back in and pick his brain further. Thank you so much for joining us. And we hope we'll see you next time on Producer's Toolbox. Thank you for being here.